Folks, I'm just sorry. I just was in a conversation with a devotee and the time just completely got away from me. So, Jeff, are you with us? There you are. Are you ready to read?
Yes, I am.
Okay, well, I'm not even going to bring the text up on the screen here. I'm just going to leave it as it is. And you just start reading, and I'll comment as appropriate. And once again, I apologize to everyone for being late, but that's what happened. I was in conversation with a devotee, and I just was not watching the time.
That's quite all right, Brother Shankara. I'm sure that our class will be well worth the wait.
Well, bless you all for being that kind of people.
So we are still in
Well, I
chapter
think we're
two,
yeah,
and
we're going to start with the reading those two shlokas again, I think.
okay, 7 and 8.
That sounds like right.
Okay, Shloka 7. Attachment is that which dwells upon pleasure. And number 8, aversion is that which dwells upon pain. And I'll repeat those. Number 7, attachment is that which dwells upon pleasure. And number 8, aversion is that which dwells upon pain. Both are obstacles to enlightenment or even to relative knowledge of a person or object. You cannot have any impartial, dispassionate insight into the character of one to whom you are blindly attached, or whom you regard with disgusted aversion. The spiritual aspirant must not love the things of this world too much, but he must not hate them either. Aversion also is a form of bondage. We are tied to what we hate or fear. That is why, in our lives, the same problem, the same danger or difficulty will present itself over and over again in various aspects, as long as we continue to resist or run away from it instead of examining and solving it.
Does all that make sense to people? What has just been said, that we must not love the things of the world too much. What does this say? This says that it is not that we can't love the things of the world. We can't love the things of the world, particularly other people and other living beings. We can love the things of the world, but we must not be attached to them. But we must not hate them either, because that's just another form of being attached. That just gets us hung up just in the same way that being loving them does. So, and it blinds us to the truth of things when we have attachment or aversion. So, any comments or questions from anyone about any of that?
Brother, I was going to say that I think it's something that all of us have experienced at various times. I mean, when you fall in love with someone in a romantic relationship, you are blinded. You're in a kind of bliss that blinds you to what the reality might be.
If there's one country and western or blues song about that, there must be 10,000. Exactly that. Love is blind. Particularly infatuation is blind. That infatuation period that we're in.
But is love blind, or infatuation, as you say, but let's just say love. Is love blind, or is it just seeing inaccurately, as we say?
Yes, well, I think that's exactly it. Yes.
Because I think at least part of what happens in that, blind love, infatuation, cuckoo crazy stuff is the thing that we are all really looking for, which is that unconditional love that comes from the divine.
Yes.
When you're in that period with somebody that you're falling in love with, you're getting that, but you think it's that person. And it's not. You are just mirroring, you're mirroring each other, the divine love, but we don't see it that way. We
Yeah.
think, oh, it's this person, this embodied being who has all these attributes, and they think the same about you. And then when the honeymoon's over, so to speak, you see this embodied being and not this God anymore, goddess.
Well, this is why Yajnavalkya says it's not for the sake of the lover that the lover loves the beloved. It is for the sake of the self. It is not for the sake of that embodied being. It is for the self that embodied being is that is the indweller in that. And so this is how then we come to regard all other living beings as embodiments of the self. Then it divinizes them and it divinizes us, and we see them in that special, sweet way that we regard the divine. And then the relationships are transformed into ones of companionship. We are brothers and sisters. We are sisters and brothers on the way. And so then it's a whole other way of being with one another. And it's sweet indeed, sweet, sweet, sweet indeed, because it's not attached. It's not a matter of attachment. It's a matter of deep, deep, deep appreciation. Anything else from anyone? Thank you, Cindy, very much for that.
Well, that is why some, they say, until you realize, you understand, love usually leads to attachment. That's why have compassion. See, when you have compassion, they call that daya. You have the same amount of love for everybody without attachment. So they split that until you realize, so have compassion.
Very well said. Very well said, Bala. Thank you for that.
Thank you, sir.
Call it what you will, it's sweet. Anything else? So I think we can understand what is meant by love the things of the world, but not too much. And by all means, do not hate them. The fact that they will be entrapments if we allow them, that's just, it doesn't mean you have to hate it. You just have to recognize it for what it is.
Well, it's what the shlokas themselves say, don't dwell on,
Right,
attachment things or aversion.
right,
So it's basically don't dwell on anything,
right.
the things you love or the things you hate.
If you're going to dwell on anything, dwell on the idea that behind all is the divine presence. And if we let our attention dwell on that, then it transforms our experience of virtually everything. Anything else from anyone?
The other thing in this, sutra, Swamiji brought out, it's not only the aversion, but it is also fear. That is very important because, a lot of people have the phobias and all those things. That also, that's what he was saying. You have to analyze and get out of that rather than keep that fear so that it will haunt you.
Yes. Right. And this is where you can get the help of qualified professionals when you do have these deep-seated fears and as you call them, phobias. This is where the help of a qualified psychiatric or trained social worker can be of great help to you. A therapist. Anything else before Jeff reads on? Okay, Jeff, thank you. Please read on.
Shloka number 9. The desire to cling to life is inherent both in the ignorant and in the learned. This is because the mind retains impressions of the death experience from many previous incarnations. I'll repeat that. The desire to cling to life is inherent both in the ignorant and in the learned. This is because the mind retains impressions of the death experience from many previous incarnations.
And the death experience can be, particularly if one is not centered at the time of the death experience, it can be a very unpleasant experience. And we may have some unpleasant experience after we leave the body. So many people do apparently have that. I can't say that I recollect anything like that myself, but that's just because I don't recollect anything. It isn't that it didn't happen, but apparently the Swami would not comment on it if it weren't the fact. Please read on, Jeff.
The doctrine of reincarnation is, of course, common to Hinduism and Buddhism, and it was entertained, though finally rejected, by early Christianity. It has already been referred to in this commentary, but now we must discuss it more fully. Prakriti has been defined as the effect or power of Brahman, the reality. In other words, this illusion, in Sanskrit Maya, of an objective spatio-temporal universe is projected by the reality itself. Therefore, it follows that Prakriti and Brahman must be coexistent, and that Prakriti, like Brahman, had no beginning and will have no end. Prakriti will continue to spin the web of a universe, to draw that web into itself, to spin the web again, over and over, forever. At the same time, within the universe, another process is at work. For it is in the nature of the individual ego sense to struggle slowly upward toward self-realization, from the inanimate to the animate, from the vegetable to the animal to the human, through thousands and even millions of births, deaths, and rebirths. The Atman is within the stone no less than within the man. But the stone can never know itself as the Atman so long as it remains a stone. It must evolve through higher forms until, at last, it reaches humanity, for it is only within the human mind-body that the individual ego can know its real nature and thus be liberated from the cycle of reincarnation. Throughout this enormous journey toward total consciousness, the individual is subject to the law of karma. His desires and acts regulate the speed of his progress. He builds or removes his own obstacles to enlightenment. His present state is continually being conditioned by the karmas of his past and continually productive of future karmas. Death does not interrupt this process, neither does rebirth. The individual is merely reborn with a body, a mind, the individual is merely reborn with a body, a mind, a character, and social surroundings which express, as it were, the total sum of his karmic balance at that particular moment in time.
Which is so eloquently said. We are born for this time because this time is suitable to the karmas that brought us here, our prarabdha karma, as it's called. The karma that is the arrow that is our being, that is shot out of a universe into manifestation. And so this arrow, this embodied being, goes through whatever it goes through until it finishes with that prarabdha karma, and then that embodiment drops. And if we've continued to create karmas that become if we continue to have desires or aversions, then we create another body in which to experience the fruits of that attachments as a desire or an aversion. And so it goes on and on. Notice the shloka starts, the Swami's explanation of the shloka starts with the fact that this is not just an individual process. The universe itself is continually reincarnating, withdrawing into itself and then re-expressing itself. No manifestation, absolute zero, gunas in equilibrium. Then this process starts again, gunas in disequilibrium, creating this great energy that then manifests as the universe again and again and again. So reincarnation is not just something that happens to us as human beings. We have been part of this process for, as the Swami said, millions of lifetimes. And Swami Vivekananda says in his talks on Jnana Yoga that we are eons old, that we were born as a seed, the seed of our being, with all of its inherent, or involute, as he called it, involute potential at the time of creation. And it has been evolving ever since. So any comments or questions from anyone about these particular ideas or any of the other ideas we've been talking about?
Brother, I was just thinking that if anyone needed an explanation of who we are, why we're here, and how all of this works, here it is in these couple of paragraphs and in the commentary you just gave us.
Well, the Swami, of course, speaks from the knowledge of realization. So this is what, so you might want to read again what he says, for starting with the shloka.
Do you recollect, or does anyone else recollect any of the Swamis or anyone addressing reincarnation? And I mean, this totally makes sense to me and probably all of us, like Jeff was just saying. But reconciling that with biological genetic DNA. Because, yeah, okay.
Yes, so Swami Prabhavananda did not himself do that, as I recall. Swami Swahananda didn't do it. But there have been Swami Satprakashananda, in his book Methods of Knowledge, addresses this to some degree. And probably there have been others that have addressed it. Certainly, Krishna even alludes to it in the Gita. He says it doesn't matter whether you see a spirit arising from matter or matter arising from spirit. It really doesn't matter. What really should matter to you is what's happening in the present moment and who you are as a result of that. What does it matter how it happened? So he addresses this very directly. Well, you know, the genetic argument is that spirit arises out of matter. The spiritual contention is that matter arises out of spirit. This is, of course, one of the underlying ideas of this this tradition and of the Vedas and of the Upanishads, that pure consciousness gives rise, and it was just verbalized here, gives rise, prakriti, pure consciousness in this energized form gives rise to the manifest universe, and again withdraws it and then expresses it. So, I just thought it was very interesting that I think it's in chapter 3 Krishna just says, we're talking about embodiment and so on. Maybe it's even chapter 2, where he says we're talking about embodiment and how this happens. And he says whether you regard it as spirit arising out of matter or matter arising out of spirit, as far as you're concerned, at this point, it's a distinction without a difference. And who are you and what are you doing? And what is it that you're creating out of your life?
I think what I'm more concerned with, though, is not which arises out of which. That's really not the issue. It's how they are connected. I mean, genetically, I can trace my ancestors back to the British Isles in the 1400s.
Mhm.
And that's a real biological scientific fact thing.
Mhm.
So does that not have anything to do with spirit or with the spirit that I am now in this body? I mean, is it just like not important, even though as a embodied being, I share characteristics of my ancestors because of the DNA they handed down?
Well, Vivekananda says you are a compilation of all of that. All of that is compiled in you. And so that speaks to the genetics. It's compiled in you in the DNA, the DNA and the chromosomal makeup of each of your cells is a compilation. You
Brother, I wonder if there has been any writings or discussion about when reincarnation happens, is it kind of in the neighborhood of where you had your last life? I'm thinking about
it's not linear, Jeff. It's not linear. You may not be born you may be born in some earlier time. From this time, you may go backwards in what it seems to us, because time is not linear. It only seems to us to be. So you may be reborn in another time in another place that has. But what were you about to add to that?
Well, I was thinking about the Tibetans when they lose a lama and they, in a few years, they go looking for the lama's reincarnation. They usually don't go to Pittsburgh. They usually look around in their immediate area, and sooner or later they find that reincarnated lama.
Well, there is a very exact process by which they go about that. Yes, and just exactly what a lama is and why they would be reborn in that seemingly linear way. I haven't any idea, but you're right, they do. And the Dalai Lama himself has said that now that the Chinese have taken over the choice of who will be Dalai Lama, he said, I may or may not be reborn again. I'll be reborn if there's a need to be. I'll make that decision when I'm 90 years old. And by the way, if I am reborn, I will be reborn as a woman. So this is what the Dalai Lama has said. So just exactly how all that works out. But you're right. In Tibet, they do, and there is a very exact process by which they go about this, and it works out over some years. But they eventually, as you say, they find that reincarnated being in the child, and there's certain characteristics that child will show, and they will recognize things of their previous incarnation, and want them, so to speak, want to be involved with them, whether it be a mala or a chalice or something. I forget the details of what I saw, but I saw a film about this once.
So it could be that in some
Yeah.
cases reincarnation is linear, and in some cases it's not. And who are we to try to say how it all works?
Precisely. And Vivekananda says, don't worry about it.
Mhm.
He says, just worry about what's you're doing now and what that's creating in the next moment and the next moment and the next moment. Don't be fretting about what you were before, what you will ultimately become. Just what is it that what is the best being I can be in this moment and then the next moment and the next moment.
Hari Om Shankaraji.
Yes, dear.
If you look at it in the Upanishad, there are a couple of things we could, connect this, because first thing is Sri Krishna says, whatever you do in this life, as far as the, for the, Kaivalya, you will carry, even if you did not finish. Arjuna asked the same question. What happens if I die in the meanwhile while I'm trying to do it? He says, nothing is wasted. It will come with you. So you will have the same, you will start from that where you left. That is what he said.
Right.
Number two is also Upanishad says that when once somebody dies, they select where they have to born, and in order to fructify their karma. Sometimes they wait until they find the right body where it has to go. So this way, the jiva selects where he has to go in order to fructify the, whatever the prarabdha karma that comes. And I think number three, if we look at all these child prodigies, they're just born with knowledge. I think all these things points out to they select where they have to born, and that is what the reincarnation is all about.
That is one interpretation. You're right, Balakrishna. That's one that the jiva selects. That is not what Sri Krishna says in the Gita. He doesn't say that exact thought. He says that the jiva will be reborn in exactly the right family, but he doesn't say that the jiva chooses. The choice is governed, of course, by the karma of that individual. So whether they make an active, conscious choice or whether their karma governs for them, as Swami Prabhupada said, since we can't really know, first of all, it's a distinction without a difference. It results in the same thing. And it directly addresses what Cindy was talking about earlier. Each of her ancestors that she can track back through this genetic research did exactly what Sri Krishna said. They didn't finish the task in that incarnation, so they took another and another and another and another, and finally it ended up being Cindy Craven, who is now very much actively working on what it means to be a spiritual rather than a physical being, or more properly said, what it is to be both at once to the highest effect. So you're
no,
right.
that is true. That is true. When I said the jiva has the choice in the sense, whatever the karma that he has to fructify. That's what I meant.
Yeah, okay, very good. Well said. We can see how juicy this shloka is, how much conversation it's producing about our birth and rebirth and so on. Anything else from anyone?
I'd like to produce a little more. When I was reading the first paragraph of the Swami's commentary, I was thinking about his comment that reincarnation was entertained, though finally rejected by early Christianity. There are some places in the New Testament, and maybe the Old, I'm not that familiar with the Old Testament, but there are places in the New Testament that reincarnation is hinted at. I remember that Jesus asks his disciples, who do they say I am? And one of the disciples responds, some say that you are Elijah. And what other interpretation could you draw from that except reincarnation?
Yes, exactly.
So I think when they were scrubbing the scriptures trying to get rid of reincarnation, they missed a few spots.
Well, here's they left it. They left the indirect gestures. Here's what happened in the Council of Nicaea in 300 A.D. when Constantine was deciding that Christianity was to be the state religion of what became the Holy Roman Empire. There was a very conscious decision made by the people who were, as you said, scrubbing the scriptures, to eliminate direct teaching of reincarnation, and the reason being is that in their insight, we would call it a psychic prediction, so to speak. In their insight, they saw this dark time coming, where if people believed that they were to be reincarnated, that they would simply say, "Oh well, I won't bother to follow the teachings of the church. I won't bother with all this now. I'll just let my life unfold the way it seems to be unfolding. I won't pay attention to what they're telling me, and I'll take care of that in my next lifetime." So the Council of Nicaea quite deliberately decided to eliminate the teaching or the embedment of the idea of reincarnation in the Christian teachings, because they said it would be unproductive for people following what they were intending to be a state religion. That's the explanation for that.
So wasn't it also a political decision because they wanted to secure their power?
Well, all of this was a political function. They were creating a state religion, which is inherently a political act. There was to be no other religion permitted within the Roman Empire. It was to become the state religion. And so they had to really work to convert people. And some of that work was very violent, as we know. Some of it was very was quite ugly. So particularly the suppression of the mother worshiping sects that were part of the Roman Empire. Many of the Roman legions were mother worshippers because of her. We can understand how a soldier looks to his mother to protect him, and it's in the foxholes that people cry out for their mothers. So it was an exercise in several centuries of very deliberate creation of the Holy Roman Empire.
And that's when they decided what books were going to be in the Bible and what ones were going to be tossed.
That was at the Council of Nicaea. That's exactly right.
Right.
And by the way, there were a number of the number has been mentioned. There were 30 Brahmin priests from India at the Council of Nicaea, because the Brahmins, of course, had what the Romans regarded as they had hegemony over the teaching of religion. And at certain times, it's been very fierce in India as well about what's been done. Only certain people could know the truth, of the scriptures.
That's
Anyway, I don't want to get into all that, but
But that's what the Brahmin caste is all about, right?
well, yes, that they have theirs is the responsibility for spirituality and the teaching of religion. Each of the other castes has their own responsibilities. That's how Manu designed the caste system. So anything else from anyone about all of it?
Shankara,
Yes, Jeff.
when was this meeting, whatever you are saying,
The Council of Nicaea was in 300 AD.
300 AD.
300 AD, yeah, or the common, or as we say these days, CE, the common era. 300 CE, and it's Council of Nicea, Nicaea. That's where it was held, which I think is in either Greece or Turkey. I'm not certain which. Probably Greece.
But before that also, there was only Christianity and Islam, right? There was nothing else, no other.
No, Islam didn't even exist by this time.
Oh no.
This predates Islam.
Oh.
So there were many other religious traditions at that time. One that was very prevalent was Zoroastrianism. The other was the Egyptian, the teachings of the Egyptian mystery temples. Those were both very prevalent. And then there was the Greek pantheon of gods and goddesses, and the Roman equivalent pantheon of gods and goddesses. If you want to know what's meant by that pantheon, you can go to the pantheon in Rome and still see representations. And then there's a temple that's been rebuilt in Greece. I forget the name of it now. The Parthenon, maybe. In any event, where the many gods and goddesses, their representations. So there were many prevalent religions in the Near East and in Europe at that time. And of course, within India and parts of what is now Persia, there was Sanatana Dharma, or it was at that time Persia. Now it's Iran, of course. So
these multiple gods and all those things, that is pagan, right? Pagan origin, right?
Say it again. I'm sorry, I missed the early part.
The multiple gods and all those things, praying of multiple gods. This is a part of the pagan system.
Well, pagan simply means of the country. That's all country. That's all pagan means. So there were many pagan conceptions, many that were available in the various what we now call countries. In those days, they were principalities or kingdoms, and so there were many. This is pantheism, many gods and goddesses. As we know, properly thought of, Sanatana Dharma, the many gods and goddesses of what is popularly called Hinduism, are not really separate gods and goddesses. They're all aspects of one God. All of them are aspects of Brahman or Prakriti. So there is a distinction made, between that monotheism, but with many gods, many apparent gods and goddesses in Sanatana Dharma, and the genuine pantheism of the Romans and the Greeks, and for that matter, the Egyptians. Although apparently there were two schools of thought in Egypt. One was monotheistic and saw all of these gods and goddesses as being representations or aspects of one god. And then there was the other school that was truly pantheistic. And we don't know really the truth about all of that, because the library that contained all the manuscripts describing it was in Alexandria, and it burnt. So much of the knowledge of the past it was lost. And it wasn't until the discovery of the Rosetta Stone that we were able to translate a lot of these languages and get some sense of the Babylonians had their own religion. The Hebrew religion was very, very strong and aggressive. So it was, Jesus was a reformer of Judaism. This is what we have to remember. Jesus did not come to found Christianity. He came to reform Judaism. And then he said, well, this will, by the end of his life, he said, well, this will spread beyond. And he instructed his disciples to go and take it beyond. So there were many religious traditions that existed at the time of Jesus, and for that matter, by 300 AD.
Thanks, Shankaraji.
Anything else from anyone? Okay, we have plenty of time. Let's read on.
Repeating Shloka 9. The desire to cling to life is inherent both in the ignorant and in the learned. This is because the mind retains impressions of the death experience from many previous incarnations. The doctrine of reincarnation is, of course, common to Hinduism and Buddhism, and it was entertained, though finally rejected, by early Christianity. It has already been referred to in this commentary, but now we must discuss it more fully. Prakriti has been defined as the effect or power of Brahman, the reality. In other words, this illusion, in Sanskrit Maya, of an objective spatio-temporal universe is projected by the reality itself. Therefore, it follows that Prakriti and Brahman must be coexistent, and that Prakriti, like Brahman, has no beginning and will have no end. Prakriti will continue to spin the web of a universe, to draw that web into itself, to spin the web again, over and over, forever. At the same time, within the universe, another process is at work, for it is in the nature of the individual ego sense to struggle slowly upward toward self-realization, from the inanimate to the animate, from the vegetable to the animal to the human, through thousands and even millions of births, deaths, and rebirths. The Atman is within the stone, no less than within the man. But the stone can never know itself as the Atman so long as it remains a stone. It must evolve through higher forms until, at last, it reaches humanity, for it is only within the human mind-body that the individual ego can know its real nature and thus be liberated from the cycle of reincarnation. Throughout this enormous journey toward total consciousness, the individual is subject to the law of karma. His desires and acts regulate the speed of his progress. He builds or removes his own obstacles to enlightenment. His present state is continually being conditioned by the karmas of his past and continually productive of future karmas. Death does not interrupt this process, neither does rebirth. The individual is merely reborn with a body, a mind, a character, and social surroundings which express, as it were, the sum total of his karmic balance at that particular moment in time. The doctrine of reincarnation is exceedingly unpalatable to many people because it makes each one of us directly responsible for his present condition. We all dislike having to face this responsibility, and some of us prefer to blame God or our parents or the existing political system for making us what we are. If we deny reincarnation and claim that this birth is our first, we are in fact disclaiming responsibility for our condition, since it then logically follows that this condition must have been ordained by God or brought about by the influences of heredity and environment. Hence, if we have been born physically or economically underprivileged, we are provided with a permanent grievance, which permits us to spend a lifetime sulking and cursing our fate, and with a permanent excuse for all our weaknesses and failures. This doctrine of reincarnation, which at first seems so grim and heartless, actually implies a profoundly optimistic belief in the justice and order of the universe. If it is we, and not God or our parents or our fellow men, who have made our present predicament, then it is we who can change it. We have no excuse for self-pity and no reason for despair. We are not helplessly doomed. We are under no mysterious prenatal curse. The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars. Is that a quote from Shakespeare?
Yes, it is.
I thought so. All we need is courage and determination not to give up the struggle. Sometimes the workings of the law of karma are quite apparent to us, in retrospect at least. We can see, looking back over our lives, how a certain tendency in our character has produced the same situation over and over again under diverse circumstances. This should certainly make us suspect that karma also operates in those areas of experience which are seemingly ruled by chance. And indeed, science keeps finding new threads of cause and effect amid life's apparent tangle. For example, the psychologists now tell us that many accidents are not accidental at all, but assertions of a subconscious desire to avoid some unpleasant problem, even at the cost of breaking an arm or a leg. Similarly, genuine symptoms of physical disease may appear as the direct result of an emotional tension and not through the simple ill luck of picking up a germ, as was previously supposed. In the above aphorism, Patanjali not only affirms his belief in reincarnation, but also by implication offers a proof of it. How could we fear death so much if we had never previously experienced it? A hen is given duck eggs to hatch in a farmyard where there are no adult ducks. As soon as the shells are broken, the ducklings make for water and start to swim. Who taught them to do this? Certainly not the mother hen. Seeing them in the water, she clucks wildly, thinking they will all be drowned. We say that the ducklings know how to swim by instinct. By instinct also, we fear death. Now, what is instinct? According to a current American dictionary, it is an inborn pattern of activity and response common to a given biological stock. According to the yoga philosophers, it is involved reason, that is, experience which has become subconscious. Both definitions agree in postulating the memory of an experience, a memory which is either transmitted by heredity through a species or carried by an individual through a series of births. The hereditist would, of course, deny reincarnation. The yoga philosopher would reconcile it with heredity, saying that the individual, being compelled by his karmas to incarnate in the form of a duck, must thereby inherit a duck's attributes, including the knowledge of swimming. So the word instinct does not help us very much, either way, toward an explanation of man's fear of death. It may be objected also that this proof of reincarnation, Patanjali will advance others later, is unsatisfactory for another reason. Why should our fear of death necessarily depend on remembered experience? Suppose we have had no previous experience of death, doesn't this make it all the more terrifying? If there is anything more fearful than the totally unknown. "I but to die," exclaims Shakespeare's Claudio, "and go we know not where." This, however, is not the whole of the answer, and perhaps Patanjali's proof of reincarnation through memory of the death experience may be justified after all. Consider this passage from the, oh boy,
Brihadranyaka means the great forest Upanishad. Brihadranyaka.
Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. There are two states for man, the state in the world and the state in the next. There is also a third state, the state intermediate between these two, which can be likened to dream. While in the intermediate state, a man experiences both the other states, that in this world and that in the next, and the manner thereof is as follows. When he dies, he lives only in the subtle body on which are left the impressions of his past deeds, and of these impressions he is aware, illumined as they are by the light of the Atman. The pure light of the Atman affords him light. Thus it is that in the intermediate state he experiences the first state, or that of life in the world. Again, while in the intermediate state, he foresees both the evils and the blessings that will yet come to him, as these are determined by his conduct, good and bad, upon the earth, and by the character in which this conduct has resulted. Thus it is in the intermediate state he experiences the second state, or that of life in the world to come.
So just a moment, Jeff. This is epitomized for us in those people who have near-death experiences. Near-death experiences are nothing new. They've been recorded as long as there have been written recordings of human experience. There are this talk of these near-death experiences, in which there's great understanding of their life in the world, as it said. Their actions in their life are illumined by the light of the Atman. They see all these things. Not only that, but sometimes even prior lives. And then they also see their life to come, as it were. Now, if you want to know what I'm talking about by someone who did not in any way take advantage of her near-death experience and explains it in as great a detail as anyone I've ever heard explain one, go online, YouTube, and type in Amy, A-M-Y, call, C-A-L-L, and near-death experience. You'll see that there's an organization, international something or other, that has this program called Present. And she speaks for an hour and something in this. You can hear exactly, and I mean exactly, what the Swami has been talking about and what Patanjali is talking about in the expression of Amy McCall. Not McCall, Amy Call. Amy Call. She speaks very simply, very straightforwardly. She's not a scholar. She was a housewife with the mother of 4 daughters at the time she had this experience. And it really gives you a great, great sense of what it is that the Swami was just talking about. And I think we'll leave it there. As those of you who know, who came when the class just started, we got started late because I came late. So we're going to end it now a few minutes after the hour because of that. But we'll leave it at that. But before we do end, is there anything that anyone wants to say about what's just been read, or anything else that we've been studying in this book? All right. I do encourage you to go and find that that talk by Amy Call. It's not only very informative, but it's very inspiring. It's very inspiring as a spiritual aspirant, because for her, it was just absolutely, as these near-death experiences are, they're life transforming. And it changed her entire view of the reality in which she lives and how she lived it. Thank God she had a loving and an understanding husband, and so her life continued as before. But you will be it is impossible not to be won over by her straightforwardness, her simplicity, and her genuineness, her authenticity in telling you how this experience began, how it unfolded in as much detail as she can tell it, and then what effect it's had on her life. So,
Brother Shankara,
yes, dear.
I heard somewhere that University of Virginia has a whole department that is studying and researching this whole rebirth, the rebirth issue.
Near-death experiences and rebirth. Yes.
Yeah. I
Indeed,
have
they are.
the website. Yeah. Sorry.
They're actively seeking out people who have some memory of a previous birth, and they're also seeking out and documenting a genuine near-death experiences. It's really very inspiring what's going on. Yes. What was the university again, dear? It slipped my mind.
University of Virginia.
University of Virginia. Yes. You just go to, you just type in University of Virginia rebirth or near-death experiences, and all of that will come up. I have looked at it in the past. Thank you, Swayam. Thank you for that tip. Anything else from anyone? By the way, there have been many, many, many wonderful, very scientific researchers in this field. One of them, his name is Pim, P-I-M, is in Mary, Pim van, V-A-N, Lommel, L-O-M-M-E-L. He wrote a book called Consciousness Beyond Life. Hold on. Gracious, I've got so much stacked on top of it. This is the book, Consciousness Beyond Life, Pim van Lommel. And if you're interested in these things, particularly about rebirth, or near-death experiences, and the nature of consciousness, what Pim van Lommel proves scientifically is what Swami Yogeshananda used to teach. Consciousness is primary and is not plural. Consciousness is primary and is not plural. And so with that, we'll call it a day. Anything else from anyone before we sign off? All right, Jeff, thank you so very much for your very capable and thoughtful reading. And for all of you who commented, thank you so very much. Cindy, Balakrishna, Jeff, I think those are the three that I remember right off. All of the rest of you, as you know what and Swayam, What I say is the fact that you don't say anything is not material. We are one beneath the surface. Consciousness is primary and is not plural. Our apparent minniness is an overlay on the truth of our being. And so your participation in this is in that sense. Let me just tell this person, I'll call him back. Jillian, I'm in just winding up a class. I'll call you right back. Thank you, dear. So, anything else from anyone? All right. Tomorrow morning, the talk is thoughtful, thorough, complete instructions from Holy Mother. It's all about, within the Bhakti frame of reference, how to think about and live our lives most productively as assured to us by Sri Sharada Devi. Thoughtful, thorough, complete instructions of Holy Mother. Until then, sayonara.